Daf Yomi Tractate, Bava, page 55b at the top of the page. We're starting a new chapter, chapter 6 of Tractate Bava, which is called Hakones Son Ladir, or just Hakones, which means one who brought in his flock of sheep into a pen. Okay, we start the new Mishnah on the top of the page. In the case of one who brought his flock of sheep into the pen and locked the door before it in a manner that is appropriate, and despite this, the sheep went out and caused damage in another person's field by eating produce or trampling it, the owner is exempt, since he safeguarded the animals appropriately. If he did not lock the door before the sheep in a manner that is appropriate, and the sheep went out and caused damage, the owner is liable since his negligence led to the damage. Okay, if the owner locked the door appropriately, but the wall of the pen was breached at night, or bandits breached it, and sheep subsequently went out and caused damage, by eating or trampling, the owner of the sheep is exempt from liability. If the bandits themselves took the sheep out of the pen and the animals subsequently caused damage, the bandits are liable. If the owner left the animal in the sun, causing it to suffer, or if he conveyed it to a deaf mute, an imbecile or a minor who are not able to safeguard it, and the animal went out and caused damage, the owner is liable because he was negligent. If the owner conveyed the animal to a shepherd to care for it, the shepherd enters his place and is responsible for the damage. If the animal fell into a garden and derives benefit from produce there, his owner pays for the benefit that it derives and not for the other damage caused. If the animal descended into the garden in its usual manner and caused damage there, its owner pays for what it damaged. How does the court appraise the value of the damage when the owner pays for what it damaged? The court appraises a large piece of land with an area required for sowing 1 seah of seed, a beit seah in that field, including Shamim beit seah be'osu sadeh. Kama ha'isri yafeh, v'kama hi yafeh. Required a seah of seed in that field, including the garden bed where the damage took place. The appraisal includes how much it was worth before the animal damage and how much it's worth now, and the owner must pay the difference. The court appraises not only the garden bed that was eaten or trampled, rather the depreciation and value of the bed as part of the surrounding area. As a result of a smaller payment, as the damage appears less significant in the context of a larger area. Rabbi Shimon says this principle of appraisal applies only in a case where the animal ate unripe produce. But if it ate ripe produce, the owner pays the value of the ripe produce. Therefore, if it ate 1 seah of produce, he pays for 1 seah, and if it ate 2 seah, he pays for 2 seah. Gemara. Tanu Rabbanon. The sages taught what is considered a manner that's appropriate for locking the door, and what's not appropriate. If one locked the door, such as it is able to withstand a typical wind, ruach mitsuya, without collapsing or opening, this is considered a manner that is appropriate. Whereas if you locked the door such that it is unable to stand a typical wind, this is considered a manner that is not appropriate. Rabbi Mani Bar Patish said, who is the Tana who taught with regard to animals that are forewarned that it is sufficient for the owner to provide only reduced safeguarding? Since the Mishnah deals with damage categories as eating or trampling, for which all animals are considered forewarned, it must be in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. As we learned in the Mishnah 45b, if the owner of an ox tied it with its reins or to a fence or locked the gate before it in a manner that is appropriate, but nevertheless the ox went out and caused damage, whether the animal is innocuous or forewarned, the owner is liable because this is not considered sufficient precaution to prevent damage. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. The Mishnah continues. Rabbi Yehuda says that if the ox is innocuous, the owner is liable even if he safeguarded it inappropriately, since the Torah does not limit the required safeguarding for an innocuous animal. But if the ox is forewarned, the owner is exempt from payment of damages, as it is stated in the verse describing the liability for damage caused by a forewarned animal, and the owner has not secured it. Exodus 21:36. And this ox was tied with reins, or behind a locked gate was secured. Rabbi Eliezer says a forewarned ox has no sufficient safeguarding at all that other than slaughtering it with a knife, according to this Mishnah. Only Rabbi Yehuda maintains that reduced safeguarding is sufficient to render exempt from liability the owner of an ox that is forewarned. The Gemara answers, you can even say that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who holds that the owner of a forewarned ox is liable, even if he provides only reduced safeguarding. Although animals are considered forewarned with regard to eating and trampling, one cannot apply to them a halacha stated with regard to an animal that is forewarned with regard to goring. The halacha is different with regard to eating and trampling, since the Torah limited the required standard of safeguarding for them. As the Amora Rabbi Elazar says, and some say it was taught in a Braita, there are 4 matters for which the Torah limited their required standard of safeguarding. These are pit, fire, eating, and trampling. Where does the Torah limit the required standard of safeguarding with regard to the category of the pit, as it is written, if a man shall open a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit, and not cover it, and an ox or a donkey fall therein, the owner of the pit shall pay. Exodus 21:33. One can infer, but if he covered it, he is exempt from liability, even though it is possible that the pit would become uncovered in the future. Where does Torah limit the required standard of safeguarding with regard to the category of fire? As it is written, the one who kindled the fire shall pay compensation. Exodus 22:5, which is interpreted to mean that one is exempt from liability unless he acts in a manner that is similar to actively kindling the fire in another's property by being negligent. Where does the Torah limit the required standard of safeguarding with regard to the category of eating? As is written, if a man causes a field or vineyard to be eaten, and he set his animal loose, and it fed in the field of another, ubir v'steacher. Exodus 22:4. This indicates that the owner does not bear liability unless he acts in a manner that is similar to causing his animal to feed there by being negligent. Where does the Torah limit the required standard of safeguarding with regards to the category of trampling? As it is written, if a man causes a field or vineyard to be eaten, and he set his animal loose, and it fed in the field of another. Exodus 22:4. This indicates that the owner is not liable unless he acts in a manner that is similar to setting his animal loose. And it is taught in a Braita with regard to the term Veshila. This is referring to damage by trampling, and similarly the verse states that sent forth the feet of the ox and the donkey, Isaiah 32:20. With regard to the term uvier, this is referring to damage by eating, and similarly the verse states, as one consumes with the tooth until it all be gone. 1 Kings 14:10. Evidently, the reason for the owner's liability is specifically that he acted in a manner that is similar to setting the animal loose or causing it to feed. One can infer, but if it did not act in such a manner, even if he provided only reduced safeguarding, he is not liable. Rabbah said, the wording of the Mishnah is also precise, as it taught the halakha specifically regard to sheep. This raises the question, since we have been dealing with cases involving an ox in all the previous Mishnayot, let this Mishnah also teach the halakha with regard to an ox. What is different in this Mishnah that it teaches the case of sheep? Is it not because the Torah limited its requirements? Specifically with regard to safeguarding against damage that is more likely to be caused by the sheep, that is, caused by eating and trampling, since the sheep are unlikely to gore? If so, the wording of the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who holds that a reduced level of supervision is sufficient only with regard to eating and trampling, but not goring. The Gemara rejects this. One cannot necessarily derive from the wording of the Mishnah that it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Perhaps the Mishnah specifically uses the case of sheep to teach the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Because it would have used an example of an ox here, one might have thought that it also includes damage caused by goring, about which it is not written in the Torah that reduced supervision is sufficient. Therefore, the Mishnah specifically uses the example of sheep to indicate damage caused by eating and trampling, about which it is written that reduced supervision is sufficient, and it teaches us that only with regard to eating and trampling, for which animals are considered forewarned from the outset, is reduced supervision sufficient according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara concludes that this is a valid reading of the Mishnah, and one may learn from it that the Mishnah may even be in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. It is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Yehoshua said, there are 4 manners in which one who commits an offense concerning them is exempt from liability according to human laws, but liable according to the laws of heaven. And it would be proper for him to pay compensation, and the cases are as follows. One who breaches a fence that stood before another's animal, thereby allowing the animal to escape, and one who bends another's standing grain before a fire so that it catches fire, and one who hires false witnesses to testify, and one who knows testimony in support of another but does not testify on his behalf. The Gemara clarifies each of the cases listed in the Braita. The master says with regard to the case of one who breaches a fence that stood before another's animal, what are the circumstances? If we say it is speaking of a stable wall that would not have fallen by itself, the one who breached it should also be liable, according to human laws, at least for the damage caused to the wall. Rather, here,